Thank you for attending the 2022 IEEE Computer Society Awards panel. I'm Nita Patel, the 2023 IEEE Computer President and Senior Director of Engineering at Otis. Tonight, there will be two panels, 30 minutes each, featuring IEEE Computer Society Award winners. These innovators were recognized by our highest awards for their outstanding achievements in technical research, education, and service. Our first panel will be moderated by 2022 IEEE Computer Society past president Forrest Schull. Forrest is the lead for Defense Software Acquisition Policy Research at Carnegie Mellon University Software Engineering Institute. The panelists include Dr. Yuren Chen, a professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Duke University. He also serves as the director of NSF Industry University Cooperative Research Center for Alternative, Sustainable, and Intelligent Computing, and is the co-director of Duke's Center for Computational Evolutionary Intelligence. His group focuses on the research of new memory and storage systems, machine learning, and neuromorphic computing and multiple computing systems. Also, we have Mr. Roger Fuji, president of Fuji Systems Incorporated, providing services in the development of large trusted systems. He also leads development of system and software hardware verification standards. Roger retired as vice president, general manager for Northrop Grumman, in charge of a research-oriented engineering division delivering communication systems for battlefield warfighting network aircraft systems. Roger is an IEEE Computer Society past president. We have Dr. Nanette Delou. She's a professor in the Computer Science and Information Technology Department at Simmons University. Her research interests include primary research in computational models of speech to improve automatic speech understanding. She also focuses on pedagogical methods to increase STEM retention and student success. Nanette is currently principal investigator on 2 collaborative NSF-funded grants. And Dr. Mark Weiss is a distinguished university professor of computer science and associate dean for undergraduate education in the College of Engineering and Computing at Florida International University. His research interests include data structures, algorithms, and education. Please join me in welcoming Forrest as he moderates this panel.
Thank you, Nita. Okay, so to start with, I always say that one of the best things about being an IEEE Computer Society volunteer is all the chances like this to kind of rub shoulders a bit with the real thought leaders in our field and hear what they've been working on. If you could indulge me for just a second, I wanted to start today by rolling the clock back a little bit. So we've heard about the awards that the 4 up here have won. We've heard about some of their career highlights. And what I wanted to do was ask them to reflect for a moment on how they got started, what the other end of that voyage looked like. And especially since that we're in a panel talking about visualizing your future, if there's advice that they might have for the folks who are really starting their careers out nowadays and trying to move forward. So maybe, Roger, would you mind if we start with you on that?
So you'd like to think about my background?
Yeah, how you got started in your career?
Okay. Well, I'm a graduate of UC Berkeley. I did my undergraduate and graduate work in electrical engineering, computer science. I wrote my thesis on pattern recognition and machine intelligence. I joined IEEE about that same time, and it's been a very rewarding career. I was a vice president at Northrop Grumman Corporation, and I was responsible for, early in my career, in certifying all the nuclear weapon systems in the United States inventory. So we were analyzing all the mathematics and guidance equations for our missiles, and also the launch command and control system. I ended my career at Northrop Grumman. I led an engineering division in San Diego. We achieved annual sales of $1,086 million, so I know how to do finance and also business development. And I'll talk a little bit about that.
What made you get interested in that line of career, though? Were you always into systems engineering growing up, or?
Yeah, I would consider myself a systems engineer, exactly, Forrest. And systems engineering is a multidisciplinary activity, and I think that's what intrigued me most. While computer science was my major, I had a lot of mathematics in my background. I liked a lot of other sciences, chemistry, communication theory, and all of that goes into being a systems engineer, allowing you to solve big, large problems. And I think that's what intrigued me most and why I ended up where I did.
So thank you. How about you, Yuran?
I received my bachelor and master from Tsinghua University in China before I moved to US, and I finished my PhD from Purdue University in 2005. I spent 5 years in industry because at that time I was not sure if I'm ready for being a professor, so I went to a company, joined the research lab, but I talked to Roger due to the economic crisis in 2008, 2009, the company shut down the research lab. I need to find a job. So I landed with the professor. And since then, I spent 6 years in University of Pittsburgh, then moved to Duke, since then,
Thank you. So, Nanette, I know that you and Mark have won awards related to education. So I wonder if you could talk about how you got started on that career.
Well, I started as my undergraduate degree was from Brown University in physics, and then I took a few years off and went back to Boston University, got a master's in electrical engineering, and my PhD is in systems engineering. At the time, we were working on automatic speech recognition, and it was when ASR went from like 35% correct to about 99% correct word accuracy rate. So it was a really, really, really exciting time. However, when I left an R1, which was right on the cusp of cutting edge research, I took a pivot and I decided to start teaching at a very small private institution, Simmons University, which is a women's-centered institution. And I have never looked back. I found it to be a very rewarding, I would say exciting at times because of the engagement with my students and with the alums who are going out and doing great things.
Thank you. Okay, and how about you, Mark?
Well, I guess my career has sort of been a lot of changes, and made a decision that I thought might have been right at the time, and then I did something else. So I started out as an undergraduate chemical engineering major, but I changed after my first year to electrical engineering because I didn't like chemistry, turns out. And then after I got my bachelor's in electrical engineering, I went to grad school at Princeton, and eventually found my way into computer science. And figuring out what to do with that degree, there was the idea of going to industry or going to academia. And people were telling me, well, professor gig looks pretty good. You only work a day or two a week.
Sorry.
So I said, okay. So I got an academic job. Although I found out later on that really wasn't true. You work a little harder than that. And I'm at a completely different place than that because I teach at a very large university. So we have the same passion for teaching, but we approach it from probably really different angles. So our university is one of the largest public universities in the country, and so we see lots of students, and we see lots of students that are first generation students, wouldn't be going to college except if they go to our university, and so it's a really great chance to make a difference in a lot of people's lives.
Great, perfect, thank you. So I think we've heard a lot about a lot of different paths that brought people into the field, a lot of different things that keep people going. I think everyone up here on the award panel are still practicing computer scientists or computing professionals, I should say. So on that line, I think one of the things that we see in the computer society is a lot of people coming in because there are so many exciting things happening in the field of computing today. It's still a very vibrant field. And so I wondered if anyone, I'll just throw this open to the panelists, if you'd like to reflect on what do you see as the big positive trends these days? What is it about being in computing that excites you and makes this a rewarding career path? Any takers? Oh, Roger? Sure.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've been given the opportunity by IEEE President Ray Liu. He assigned me the task of chairing an ad hoc committee for IEEE where I'm supposed to define IEEE in 2050. So what we're trying to do is looking ahead at what what IEEE's environment will be in the business environment in 2050. As many of you know, open access, open science is coming into play, and that is affecting our publications business. We do about $220 million in subscription business. That is people subscribing to our journals and our magazines, which many of you write to. But that world is going to end because the subscription business will no longer appear because all of that content will be made for free. So what we're having to do is take a look at what our world will look like. And I'll just mention one of the things that our ad hoc committee discovered as a result of talking to futurists around the world is that you will have a cognitive digital twin that is very, very active, working on your behalf. Now, many of you have a digital twin today. Whenever you go and log in and you buy something online, surprisingly, the next day you get pop-ups on your email that says, hey, you might be interested in the following. Well, Amazon, all of the online retail stores are surfing what you have acquired and basically then figure that you might be interested in something. That's a very primitive form of a digital twin. But in the future, you will have a very powerful AI engine that is recognizing your tendencies, recognizing your wants and needs, and surfing all of the different repositories out there. Because when open science happens, there will not be a single large library like IEEE has. It'll reside in multiple places, so there'll be many locations, thousands and thousands of papers, and your digital cognitive twin will be surfing that and returning to you, oh, you might be interested in this paper. But more importantly, what it will do, it will begin to interpret for you the things that the human is good at. The human is good at imagining and creating. Your cognitive digital twin will start to do that for you. And then suggesting to you, here's the solution or here's an avenue you should investigate. Now, many of the research you're hearing about today, that's exactly what happened with the people you see on the stage here. But if your cognitive digital twin does that for you, the fear that we have is that you, as a human being, will become relegated to a bystander. And that's very dangerous kind of approach. You saw probably some Star Trek episodes where that has happened, where the human has evolved to something less than what they used to be. In fact, a lot of our manual labor jobs that we have today will be done by automation, right? So the fear is that the world is going to overtake us with electronics.
Great, thank you. But any other thoughts? Computing trends that make you inspired or seem hopeful for the future?
I mean, I want to say something about computer science education.
Sure.
At this point, the computer scientists that we're educating, generally, most of them are programmers. And I think as educators, we have to figure out where programming is going because as AI gets more powerful, a lot of the things that programmers used to do and you had to be highly skilled are going to become more automatic. So where can we position our students to be the next leap above and, as you said, not become bystanders as the economy passes them by?
Yeah, I was thinking just last week I was reading about Copilot.
Yes.
Right, which is you type in a comment and it basically spits out code that we would be giving in a Programming 1 class. And so
just as buggy, but no more buggy.
So it, the whole things that are going on now with machine learning are going to affect how we teach computing, in the next few years.
I will say, we're probably going to face a very different world in the next decades, regarding the relationship between the AI or technology versus the human being. Mm-hmm. So I was attending a section regarding the AI Institute, which I also leading, one of the 18 AI institutes, from NSF. There was one AI institute, changed the slogan from AI working for human to AI working with human. I think that is a trend we're going to face. I think, Roger just mentioned the digital trend. That's one trend. So you think about what we have done in the past decades. originally people carry on both the knowledge transfer and also the processing with the computing, and later on the computer replace a human for the computing. But we have all the data. We have to talk about the data-centric technology. We talk about how we can learn the data for the knowledge and also e-experience. So this actually positions the human in a very different role than before, so that we need to be more creative because any other thing can be done by computers. That's actually going to introduce new challenges for the technology and for the education. I think that's the things I want to emphasize.
Thank you. So a lot of good answers here. I mean, talking about both from a research point of view or from just a human in the ecosystem point of view, the way that software and computing can be a trusted agent, something that helps you get the job done. Also, part of what we'd like to see is how the computing helps you go into computing as a reasonable career field. Take advantage of that and take advantage of the benefits that we've had there before. I think we've already started to kind of cross the line over into some of the challenges. We talked about trying to define these systems and the functionality that they can provide to keep, to make sure that humans still have a useful and enriching part of their jobs left to do. We don't give away too much to the computers. I wonder if there's other challenges that you see. I mean, if we're thinking about trying to inspire an up-and-coming community of researchers here, what kind of problems would you like to see them take on? What kind of challenges do you see that computing needs to start to grapple with? Anything? Yeah, Roger, please.
Well, again, one of the things that we've discovered in doing this research is that the next generation, maybe beyond Generation Z for 2050, they're going to be more mission-based oriented in terms of solutions. They're not going to be interested in specific technologies. By specific technology, photonics might be a specific, optics might be a specific technology, communications might be a special technology, but what the future young generation is going to be interested in is mission-based solutions, which like climate change, reliable food sources, virtual healthcare services. So it involves multidisciplinary activities that right now we in IEEE tend to have silos, right? Computer society, communication society, signal processing, photonics, and so forth. We are going to have to do more multidisciplinary work because that will be what the younger generation will want to see and want to see solutions that are more oriented to more what we called in the committee more utopian kind of attitudes.
I will say there are going to be two boundaries we're going to break in the next few decades. The first one is the reality and the virtual reality. The boundary becomes so blurred because we start with the new generation. They're so dedicated to this, we call the mental words or such kind of stuff. So that become very important in the social life, for them. And we start to see the boundary become very blurred. Another one is the biological bodies versus the digital twins, or on the first. It's not just talk about how we can replicate the mechanism of the human body. It's also about how those mechanisms will be able to replicate it in both sides, so that we can see the very blur or even no boundaries between those two counterparts.
Any other thoughts on research challenges?
Well, I think echoing some of the things that have been said is that as we're going through and having things like a digital twin or an out-of-body experience, is that we have to make sure that it's reflective of all of our experiences and we're not leaving huge swaths of humanity behind. I think AI works well. I mean, those of us who know that it works well in generalizing, but once you've got small populations, that's what it actually models out of the models. So trying to figure out how you can basically not overfit the model to the masses and be able to include people who are different in some ways in AI models that come forward. Because I don't think my Amazon twin really gets me yet.
And to that, just a lot of the ethical dilemmas that are going to come with the changes in computing are orders of magnitude more than what we've had so far. And it's going to require not just computing people, but people from philosophy, political science, all sorts of different areas to really try to work some of these details out.
So if you don't mind, I had one question just for our educators. And since you mentioned ethics, I mean, do you see a change in that? Are people grappling with how to bring more ethical education into the
So-
technical education that we give folks today?
I have a panel at a different CS education conference on using science fiction to teach ethics. And we find in the classroom that if you have a sci-fi story and you got to pick it right, you can actually start bringing up discussions where if people were just talking about reality, they may shy away, especially in these confrontational times, from talking about things that are very real. So there is a book that's coming out about using sci-fi to teach ethics, and computer scientists are starting to use this book to teach ethics in the classroom, and I think that's a good move. It's not usually Star Trek, though.
No, but I find that that's, Star Trek and others,
Yeah.
grabs the imagination, right, in a really helpful way
Yeah.
sometimes. Okay. So, one of the things to come around to that, so we've talked about challenges, we've talked about benefits. I think one thing that brings us all here today is the Computer Society, providing a forum to talk through these types of issues. And I didn't want the opportunity to go by without asking, for those on the stage, is there more that the Computer Society can be doing, to really help individuals come along with their, both their technical, their ethical, educational, other dimensions of their professional growth? Any thoughts? No? All right, Roger.
Well, again, one of the things we fear the most is that our AI engines, artificial reality, virtual reality things, are causing us to lose our ethics or breach our ethics. And it can happen very easily because it happens without sometimes you're knowing about it. Your digital twin does something publicly on your behalf, and then suddenly you're having to reap the consequences of that. So I think we as the builders of these systems, we as the computer scientists, the technologists, need to be very, very careful about how we manage this, because this can get out of hand, and you may have digital twins and arguing with each other, right, and using your name on their behalf. And so I think this can really spiral out of control if we're not careful. We're seeing some of that already on our social media, right? Things that are said are taken and then used in a different context and used in another context, and all of a sudden you don't really know what ground truth really was. And we as technologists have that responsibility to try to monitor and control that. And I think that's one of our biggest concerns going forward.
Great, thank you. I was going to say, I'm old enough that I can remember when we used to have all these utopian conversations around Facebook and how wonderful it was going to be to bring people into conversation with each other. And then it turns out a lot of that conversation is not so, not always so helpful, I guess. Any other thoughts? What else can the Computer Society be doing?
I was actually happy to hear about talking about ethics as practitioners, because often you hear about teach ethics and then with the idea that if you give students ethics, then they're just going to be fine for the rest of their careers. But things change so much that I think you don't realize the consequences of one's actions. There's got to be a place to course correct at some point and to keep the discussions alive well into your careers and well into the careers of industries.
Good. And I think it was Mark, by the way, that earlier talked about bringing in the ethicists directly, or the philosophers, right? Making sure that we have that multidisciplinary take on it.
Yeah. I mean, you have to know where the experts are sometimes.
Yes. Okay, great. So in our last couple minutes here, the time is so fleeting, unfortunately, but I think the one last thing I wanted to put all of our panelists on the spot with is for folks that are just starting out their careers today. I mean, you all have started out, you've had these career highlights that are wonderful and merited the awards that we talked about. What advice would you give to folks who are at the beginning of their career these days in a very complicated environment, I think?
Well, I can only reflect on what happened in my career. And the simple statement is there is no bad assignment. A lot of times, early in my career, we were launching satellites for the first time, and so there was a lot of unknowns about the mathematics and the guidance equations, the propulsion, and so forth. And so my job was to verify and validate the mathematics behind powered flight. And so I ran all kinds of simulations and proved that it worked. On the next contract we got, I'm sitting there and saying, I'm going to get powered flight again. And my boss skips that and gives it to someone else. And he gives me the anomalous behavior assignment. And that was given to the lowest grade person on the team before. And I'm looking at him and I'm saying, what did I do wrong, right? And he says, so I go to him and I talk to him, I say, what did I do wrong? He said, you did nothing wrong. He says, your powered flight, all they have to do is duplicate what you did. You know, there's no more work to be done there, but we don't know what to do about anomalous behavior. So why don't you figure it out? And that turned out that in doing that, I learned more about how the system really should work. And I ran so many different simulations, and I found an error, by the way, that shocked the entire development community. And when I talk to other chief engineers, they say the same thing. The best assignment they got was to look at anomalies, because in order to figure out what goes wrong, you had to know what was going right. So, you know, a lot of times you don't know when an assignment will take you to the right spot. You just have to make the best of it. And so my advice to you is never say no to an assignment, and take it and make it the best you can. And then that will broaden your experience. And I can tell you, in the business world, I got transferred around to so many different assignments. I was wondering whether they were really plotting me to exit the company or, you know, just filling some spots. The reality is, if you want to be CEO of a large corporation, they want you to know all parts of it. So by transferring me to all these different parts of the company and different assignments, they gave me the experience I needed to advance in my career. So again, people were kind of looking after me, and so you should never turn down an assignment. It might turn out to be your best.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
There are about two advices that maybe I can think about. The first one is, you're not fear about the feeling something or feelings. The reason is when you are young, the cost to correct any mistake will be much lower than later. So these are try out many things and then figure out what you like the most. I spent 5 years in industry. At that time, many of my colleagues already started their, career in academia, but I still feel like that 5 years I did not waste because I figured out what I like, which is not, working in the company, but in the academia. So that's number one. And number two things is, when everybody telling you this is a good direction or good decision, they probably already become too late. Mm-hmm. So you're going to start with something nobody's going to believe in you, and you're going to figure out by yourself. So you're going to believe yourself, and especially when nobody believes in you, and you're going to start with those things very early. I think that's the most important part.
Thank you. You
I guess I'm echoing a lot of the things said here, but I would say we're all optimizing in small steps. We can fall into local minima. I think it's important to push and to find our edge, not fear failure or success, because they're both information, and just try to find joy in the work that you do, and also don't lose your soul. So if you can manage those things by the time you're dead, good. Yeah.
And Mark, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, so definitely you have to enjoy what you're doing. If you're not, you have to give it a little bit of a chance. You can't just say after 2 weeks, I hate this job. But after a while if you enjoy something or not. And if you're not enjoying it, you have to find something else. One thing I would also say from my experience is you can get a lot of advice from people, but at the end of the day, you're your own decision maker, right? You have to make your decisions and live with them to the best of your ability. And no matter what other people are telling you to do, if you don't believe it yourself, then you really can't just keep doing it. You have to do what you believe in, what makes you happy.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the conversation here today. I think, speaking from my own personal view, I think sometimes when you see people that have had these kind of august awards and been recognized, you assume it's all been planned out from the beginning. So I think that this conversation about, be open to career pivots, be taking advice from everywhere, there's no bad assignments, try things while you still can, I think has been really wonderful. And I hope it's been helpful for you too. So with that, let's give one last round of applause for congratulating our panelists. And with that, I'm leaving the stage right on time. A bunch of system engineers all came in on time, on budget. And I will turn things over to my good friend, David Ebert, and the next panel. Thank you.
So that was an awesome panel. And as I introduce our second panel, if the panelists could come up as I introduce you, that would be great. Our second panel, as Forrest mentioned, is going to be moderated by David Ebert, who is the Viz 22 General Co-Chair a professor of computer science and electrical and computer engineering, associate vice president of research and partnerships, and director of the Data Institute for Societal Change at the University of Oklahoma. This panel includes 4 of our award winners as well. Ms. Laurel Coletta, who is retired from IBM as a senior marketing manager in IBM's storage system division. Laurel's career spanned the roles of customer support, software quality assurance, patent engineering, systems development, architecture, and standards development. She was actively involved in the initial setting of SQA standards. Laurel is also a past Computer Society president. We have Dr. Shubhasesh Mitra, a professor of electrical engineering and of computer science at Stanford University. He is also the associate chair, faculty affairs of computer science, directs the Stanford Robust Systems Group, and leads the computation focus area of the Stanford System X Alliance. His research ranges from robust computing, nanosystems, electronic design automation, and neurosciences. Please welcome Dr. Mitra. Dr. Joseph Torales is Saburo Morago Professor of Computer Science at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He is also the director of the Center for Programmable Extreme Scales Computing and a co-leader of the Intel Strategic Research Alliance on Computer Security. Joseph's research interests include multiprocessor architectures, NUMA organizations, cache coherence protocols, hardware synchronization, and prefetching schemes. And we have Dr. Modi Young, who is a security and privacy research scientist with Google and has held various appointments in the computer science department at Columbia University. Modi describes himself as a computer scientist, cryptographer, and information security researcher. His main professional interests are in security, privacy, and cryptography, as well as the theory of computation and applications for computing in the secure world. Please welcome all of our panelists and David Ebert as he moderates this.
Well, thank you very much, and allow me to add my congratulations to the amazing achievements that you've had so far in your career. You know, Forrest did a great job in starting good conversations going off. And one of the things that I always think about is, you know, what's the best advice that's helped you get to where you are today? I got a piece of advice early in my career that I thought, from a department head, I thought, you know, why would I want to do that? And it was to take the job where you learn the most, and not what would be the easiest or the most prestigious. And it took me a few years to appreciate that, but I really think back that was such good advice. And I'd like to hear from our panelists of what advice have you gotten that you think, reflecting back on what you've achieved so far, has had the biggest impact on your career? We'll start with Subhashish.
Okay, hi everybody, thank you for being here, and thanks for inviting me. Advice. Okay, you know, I can think of 2. So my thesis advisor, he was actually the first president of the IEEE Computer Society. When you saw the McCluskey Award that, you know, like Uran got, so that's Ed McCluskey. So, you know, when I was a graduate student, you know, one day he came to my office, and those of you that knew him in person would relate to this, I think, you know. He just gave me a piece of paper and then went away. And so it was actually a long piece of paper. It was a long poem. And this poem essentially, you know, said, you know, there was this kid, you know, who was growing up and he was pretty good in math. And then the next stanza is, he was pretty good in English. And, you know, it kind of goes on like that. And in the middle of the poem now, you know, this kid now kind of hits the job, you know, and, you know, finds out that, you know, he wasn't actually that good in math. And then, you know, he wasn't that good in English. But the last 4 that he highlighted was, if you want to be great, pretty good is in fact pretty bad. So actually he had a message for me at that time. So, you know, I actually repeat this to my students. So that's the first one. And the second one is, when I was finishing my PhD, you know, I had a whole bunch of academic job offers, you know, and then he walked up to me and he said, you know, and I was trying to make a decision, and he said, you know what, every engineering professor should spend some time in industry. So that's why actually I did not take any of those job offers, and I actually went to industry. So these would be kind of two interesting things. I do have a third one, but we might come back to that later.
Okay, thank you. Laura?
My advice was pretty simple, and it was basically because I'm a fairly, I don't know, at times combative person, but the advice was you have 2 ears, 1 mouth. Shut up and listen.
Very good advice, always. And it's something we can all do more of, and at least I know I can. And Joseph?
Okay, so the best advice I got is from my advisor, John Hennessy. And he said, when I started my career, he said, focus on one problem, an important one, not a fashionable one, and just continue on that problem, despite the fact that you may find setbacks and other things, but just focus on that and persist. And that's what I did.
Great. And Moti?
Yeah, besides all the advices that the other got, that I got from various people too, the concrete advice that helped me start my research career was the professor who became my advisor actually gave in class a description of the ecosystem of research. There are conferences. I mean, a student doesn't know that there is a conference. Conferences in this area and that area. This is a high-level conference. This is this. Go for research. Second advice, there was a conference. Go for a conference. Before I started my PhD, I already went to a conference to see that name like Rohit Parikh is not just a Parikh theorem, but it's a person that you can have lunch with.
Well, that's true. It's always, amazing when you meet people that you studied them or their theorems gave you problems when you were a student and you finally finally figured it out.
So they are all human beings.
Yeah.
And I tell students now, all the people that you read their papers of, they are just human beings, Find mistakes, find errors in the modeling, and find something better.
Yeah,
That's
really
a
good advice.
very pragmatic way to look at things.
Yes. And Forrest was asking people earlier about what they saw as potential great opportunities. And as we're in a social technical society now, sort of another thing to think about is while there's all these great opportunities as computing evolves, what's your biggest concern on the direction of the use of computing as we move forward? Now, are there things that you think we all need to think about and consider as we're doing our research and moving forward? And let's start this way again with Moti.
So, I turned my concerns into a career because I'm in security and I'm always looking for what can go wrong in some sense and predict what may go wrong and thinking not just look at a gadget and see what's wrong with it and write a paper about it. That may be something to do, but it's a little bit too narrow. But think about systems and so on in a big way, and imagine possibilities of what a bad guy can do with your system. We are talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on, is augmenting society and human thoughts and taking over for humans. But they are also presenting new vectors for attacks on our humanity and our civilization. So it's known that cryptographers never sleep well, because you're always worried. And but this is the task of this part of protecting the computing infrastructure and all the implications of it to society, because it's very hard to distinguish nowadays between society and computing. They are the same. Everything that we do, we do better with computers.
Well, that's true, and that's why within the National Science Foundation, more and more of the programs from SCIES are integrated with the other, the SBE directorate and other directorates, because it affects everything we do. And you need pure fundamental core research, but you really need to think about the integration into everything else that's going on. And so, Joseph?
So you're asking what is one concern that you have about computing, right? My main concern is that people use computing to cheat, right? To misinform people and enslave them, enslave people. So I think that we need to redouble efforts to enhance security in our computing infrastructure and police the internet so that people can use this new technology safely.
That's very good. And how about you, Laurel?
Well, I think we are all on the same plan here. The major concern I have is that so often we're looking and focused at our technology advances and what we are individually doing or as a team, but we're not thinking about the end user or the society in general. And we see some of these problems, particularly today, with iPhones. There's 3 or 4 times as much power in that than there was in my first computer. And if you're not aware of what the system is doing, you are really exposed, and which is the security part of it.
Absolutely. Chief?
Okay, I think, everybody else, talked about profound things. I'll talk about something more tactical, and which I really think is a problem with, our computing community in general. And that has to do with, I think, computing education, and, there was a, so it was interesting, on the previous panel, there was this talk about mission-oriented stuff, right? Like figure out the brain or something like that, right? So that's wonderful, and I actually believe that those are the grand challenges that we'll be solving in the next 50 years. But if you look at how we are educating our students, I think it's very compartmentalized. Even between computer science and computer engineering, there is a big gap. And as you know very well, everybody wants to study computer science. By the way, I belong to the CS department. But very few students are really getting into what would be called computer engineering. I consider myself very fortunate that in India they had this discipline which is computer science and engineering, which is very different from EE versus CS. And I think that's a real problem, especially if we have to solve these grand challenges. That would be my thing.
I'll admit it that I ended up with my previous job at Purdue University by applying to the wrong department. I was a computer scientist, and I applied to the ad in at the time where you go through the pages in the magazine to decide where to apply, and Purdue had 2 ads, and my wife read me the address for the electrical and computer engineering department, and they're the ones that decided to hire me. And so I got trial by fire of learning computer engineering and really appreciated the difference. And, I ended up having joint appointments, but the structure and way you think of things is quite different. And you need both to come to a problem to make that solution. And that siloing is something that education really needs to look at. How do we break down? But academic systems are slow to change. And it's always very hard to come up with these programs, but hopefully over the next decade or 2, we'll see more progress in that. But we can hope. And another thing that I guess I'm someone who, I always say I overanalyze any opportunity to death and try to figure out what to do. And, before I make my final decision, I second guess myself and consider these things. So, if you look back at your career, is there anything that you would do differently that, looking back, you say, really, that was not the right decision at a time, that, people, it may look good, but then you're looking back and, there's some lesson to be learned from it. So Sushi?
And I go first,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
For this difficult question, and I did not prepare for it. I actually think, that poem that I talked about earlier, and I think I was given that poem for a reason, because I did do some research in India before, in my school, before I came, to Stanford. And I think, I used to think that research was about, writing papers, right? And I think most probably Professor McCluskey saw that. And that's why, he left that poem on my desk. So I think, I was probably not doing things right, and I had the right kind of mentors that, moved me in a different direction. That's what I would like to think.
Great. And how about you, Laurel?
Well, I think one of the things I could have used, I was a little laid back along the career. I wish I'd known earlier about agitating for something different when I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. Despite the value of whatever it was. One of the joys that I think I got from Computer Society was the challenges that I got in leading large groups, which I had never done in IBM, and totally different from industry.
That's definitely the case. How about over here? Any advice from that?
Well, I would say that over the years, you get to understand what strategies work better and which ones work worse and so on. And so you think about, maybe I should have done this or that. I think overall, maybe what I would say is that I think it would have been better to put more eggs in fewer baskets, right? So meaning that focus on fewer problems and do them better than do more and less well. So that's something that I think is a good advice also.
How about you, Modi?
Yeah, I've done my share of errors and mistakes. The only guys that don't do any error in their career are those that don't have prolonged career. But the main thing is to look forward at any point of time. You are at the situation and you correct and you go on. Don't look back. I'll give you an example. I finished my research for my PhD in 3 years at Columbia University, and I said, okay, maybe I will never find a job in New York. I'm staying. I stayed another 2 years because New York City is exciting. And then I thought, these 2 years I kind of wasted. I took more courses, study other things, and I thought, I wasted them. But then, of course, I got all my jobs in New York City. But then I realized that what I did in these 2 years, I used later. So it was not a mistake. It was furthering my knowledge and not scattered all over, but focused, but nevertheless, it was a mistake that turned out to be a blessing. So never guess what was a mistake or what was actually something that will work for your advantage. Look forward and correct.
So that's great, and this sort of leads to giving some advice about talking to people about what they could do as they get into their career. And I guess one thing that I'd like to end with is, what would you like people who are starting out in their career at a point where they're considering a change in their career or their decision path to really do as a result of some of the things they've heard here today?
Okay, I'll start. I'll continue and start. I have an ex-PhD student that I advised that whenever we meet, he always remembers what I told him. And this was a very short sentence: don't jump. And the don't jump is applied all over the stack. Don't jump to a field. Don't jump to a research conclusion without enough experimentation. Don't jump here, don't jump there. Do things in a very thorough way. Don't choose a problem just because it's fashionable. I think somebody mentioned it before. Choose it because something else, choose carefully. So this short sentence, don't jump, can be applied in many aspects of career. And it's good. Always take a breath before you do something, inspect things in a broad way, and only then do it.
Very good. Joseph?
So I would say for those who are intending to take research careers, I would say pick problems that are challenging and important as opposed to fashionable, right? No, because those that are fashionable are probably going to be looked at by many other people. And so that's not what you want to be when you start.
Very good. And Laurel?
If you're not enjoying what you're doing in your current position or current education, look at what you want to do, or where you find joy, because it makes everything easier.
That's very, very true. And sometimes hard to do, but
Very.
that's very good advice. So we'll end with you, Subhashish.
Okay, this is for, mostly research-oriented people, academia or industry. Like sometimes people ask, like how do you tell, what problem to work on? Or, if you had an idea, it's more about if you had an idea to pursue, how do you know it's a good idea? And, and I have found this actually for almost everything that I've done, that an idea is a good idea if there is a sizable chunk of people that think that that idea won't work. Because if everybody thought that, like you told them an idea and they said, sure, that's such a great idea and it would work, that means it's not a big enough idea because anybody could do it. So that would be my little point here.
Wow. Well, I think between great advice from this panel, great advice from the previous panel, and a fascinating discussion. So I'd like to thank you all for such great advice and this time to spend with you to have a discussion about your careers and looking at the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There was someone? What? Okay. And so we'll now have our reception outside for everyone, and we hope that you get a chance to come up and congratulate the awardees and talk to them about personal questions that you have. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you.